Good evening. If you are here, it is because sleep has not yet come. Maybe your mind is full, or maybe your body is even tired, but something inside you still resists. Today, we are going to tell you an old story, a story about courage, stubbornness, and fire. Its name is Prometheus and the Fire of the Gods. If you like the journey, you can like it or sign up, but only if you want. Take your time. Now, before we begin, try to make the environment calmer. Turn off the main light. Leave only a dim bulb on, or none at all if you prefer. Lie down slowly. Breathe deeply. If you want, close your eyes. Imagine that you're in a very old place. There is no city. There is no fire. There is nothing that you know today. Only a cold, dark, silent world. The ground is hard, the wind is icy, and you feel your fingers starting to hurt from the cold. You look around and see only stone, fog, and shadow. There is no heat, there is no light, only the sound of your own breathing. Now, see someone approaching? He is tall and strong, but he is not here to scare you. His name is Prometheus. He is not a god, but he is not a man either. He is a titan, one of the ancient beings who came before the gods of Olympus. Unlike the other titans, Prometheus cares about you. He sees you. He listens to you. He wants to help you. While Zeus, the king of the gods, ignores humans and lives among parties and lightning bolts high in the sky, Prometheus walks the earth, observing. He sees how you suffer. He sees the cold, the hunger, the fear, and he feels something that not all gods understand. Compassion. He knows that you will not survive like this for long. He knows that you need something essential, something that only the gods have, something that has been forbidden to humans. Fire. High on Mount Olympus, fire belongs to Zeus. He guards this flame jealously, like a treasure. Only the gods can use it. Humans cannot. They must live in the dark, freezing, without knowing what heat or light is. For Zeus, this is a way to maintain control. Without fire, you will never be able to grow, create, or dream. But Prometheus thinks differently. He believes in you. He believes that you can learn, that you can build, that you can be more than just shadows crawling in the mud. And so, he decides to do something dangerous. He will steal fire from the gods, not for himself, but for you. He knows that this will have a high price. Zeus does not forgive betrayal, but he goes anyway. He climbs to the sky. He walks through the clouds. He sneaks into the forges of Hephaestus, the god who makes the weapons of Olympus. There he finds a live coal, small but powerful. He takes this coal and hides it inside a piece of dry plant. It seems small. It seems fragile, but there is the beginning of everything. Carefully, Prometheus descends back to earth. He walks through cold fields, through moonless nights, until he reaches where you are. And then, without saying anything, he extends his hand. You look, and there, glowing in the darkness, is the fire, the first flame, the first light, the first chance. You feel the heat. You stretch out your hands. The flame dances between your fingers, and for the first time, you are no longer so afraid. The cold recedes. The darkness hides, and on Prometheus's face, a calm smile appears. He said nothing, but you understood everything. The world will never be the same again. The fire didn't make a sound when it arrived. It just appeared, trembling in the dark, like a frightened puppy. But you felt it. You felt it in your body like a warm hug after a lifetime of cold. You felt it in your eyes, which could now see further. You felt it in your soul, which for the first time had the courage to dream. The fire was small, but it was enough. With it, you began to change. You learned to keep the flame alive, to gather dry wood to protect the heat from the wind. You discovered that fire kept animals away, heated food, and lit up the night. For the first time, you began to build something small, simple, but your own. And that, for the gods, was a problem. Because with fire came doubt, and with doubt came the question that no one should ask: why should we obey? High up on Olympus, Zeus smelled the smoke. It didn't take long for him to realize what had happened. The king of the gods' anger wasn't just out of pride, it was fear. Fear that humans would learn too much. They had evolved too much. They had become unpredictable. Zeus liked control. He liked order. He liked being feared, and Prometheus had shattered all that with a single spark. The Titan had known that punishment would come, but he didn't run away. He didn't hide. He stood there, watching you learn, laugh, warm yourselves around the flames. For him, it was worth it, even if it cost him dearly. And it did. Zeus, furious, didn't come down alone. He called the other gods. Together, they planned a cruel response. First, they made a poisoned gift for men, a punishment disguised as beauty. They created Pandora, the first woman, made of clay, sculpted to perfection. Each god gave her a gift: beauty, song, seduction, and a box that should never be opened. Of course she opened it, not out of malice, out of curiosity. From inside came all the evils of the world: disease, envy, sadness, fear. The fire brought knowledge, the box, suffering. And in the midst of all this, only one thing remained trapped inside: hope. But this punishment was still not enough. Zeus wanted to hit Prometheus directly. It was not enough to hurt humans. He had to break the rebel, show the universe the price of disobeying a god. So, he had Prometheus captured and had him chained up on a mountain where no one could free him. Not for a day, not for a week, but for all eternity. There, trapped between rocks and wind, Prometheus was condemned to a cycle of pain. Every day, an eagle came from the sky. It pecked at his liver. It tore at his flesh. It ate in silence, and at night, his body regenerated, and the next day, it all started again, forever. An endless punishment, a repeated pain, like a scratched record, spinning over and over. And yet, he did not scream. He did not beg. He did not regret. Because down there, even among the pain and the smoke, you still had fire, and that was enough. Time has passed, but no one knows how much, because up there, on the mountain where Prometheus was imprisoned, there were no clocks, not a shadow, no sign that anyone cared. The wind blew the same cold every day. The stone was hard, the currents, thick and cold as ancient ice. And the eagle came, always, with wings spread, silent as death. Prometheus saw the sky lighten. I knew the time. The day began again, and with it, the pain. The bird landed on him with precision. The beak tore his skin. I went deep, until I found the liver. I pulled, I chewed, I swallowed slowly, and he would endure. He took a deep breath. I closed my eyes, not because I wanted to run away, but because I wanted to remember. Remember the reason. Remembering you down there, with your hands outstretched near the flame. Remember that the fire was alive, that the sacrifice had made sense. Because even from the top of that prison, Prometheus knew humans were changing. They were learning. They were creating. The fire had brought more than warmth. It had brought choice, voice, the ability to think, to ask, of not accepting everything quietly, and that was dangerous. That's why Zeus maintained the punishment. I couldn't give in. If he freed Prometheus, other gods could imitate him. And Olympus depended on order, of obedience. But there was a problem. Even with Prometheus imprisoned, humans did not stop. They did not return fire. On the contrary, they used it. They expanded. They built houses. They set up bonfires. They cooked. They melted metals. They created stories, songs, symbols. The flame became part of the world. It was too late to erase it. Punishment became empty revenge. Zeus knew. But pride was greater than regret, and so he waited. He waited for Prometheus to break, that he would ask for forgiveness. But that never happened. The Titan could handle it all. There was no pleading, there was no anger, just silence, a stubborn silence, as if to say, I would do it all over again. And that infuriated Zeus more than any scream, because there was no way to beat someone who didn't give up. And down there, you began to understand the price of freedom. Every advance came with pain, with error, with chaos, but also with beauty, with creation, with love. And the name of Prometheus began to be remembered, not like a criminal, but like a hero, a symbol, the one who defied the gods for you. While the world turned and civilizations were slowly born from clay and wood, Prometheus's body remained tied up on top of the mountain. There, time seemed to stand still. But below, on the ground he had helped to warm, humans began to tell stories around the fire he had brought. First came whispers, then firmer words, then songs, and finally, names. His name. Prometheus became a living legend. Even imprisoned, even tortured, he was present in every flame lit, in every tool invented, in every bonfire where someone told a story to chase away the darkness. Humans did not forget. Not even when Zeus tried to erase his memory. He sent winds to blow away the ashes. He sent rain to put out the bonfires. He sent fear, but none of these things lasted, because every time one flame went out, another one was lit in another corner. It was impossible to contain, and little by little, even some gods began to doubt. Was Prometheus really wrong? Did humans deserve so little? Or was Zeus afraid of what he could not control? High on the mountain, Prometheus felt. He did not see, he did not hear, but he felt as if the very fire that he had given to men was now returning to him in the form of a memory, in the form of strength. And that is why he endured. The eagle came, as always. It tore and pecked, but the pain no longer hurt as before. It was as if he was no longer whole there. Part of him was somewhere else, spread across all the human hands that held torches, that baked bread, that molded clay. He was a memory, and he was hope. Even if Zeus wanted to erase everything, the truth is that he had already lost. The fire was already loose. The idea had already taken hold. Freedom had already germinated. And no matter how hard the gods tried, no one could make the world go back to the way it was before the fire. Prometheus's punishment, cruel as it was, became a symbol. It became a question. How long is it worth obeying those who have power? How much does courage cost? You, who are listening to this story now, may be wondering, was he never freed? Was no one ever helped? The answer is on the way, because every pain, no matter how long it lasts, one day finds someone willing to break the chain. And that is what happened. But not yet. First, another generation had to grow up. A generation of heroes, of demigods, of children of men and gods. A generation born after the fire that carried within itself both power and doubt. And one of them was the chosen one. But that part is yet to come. For now, imagine the sky darkening once more, the wind cutting through your face, the eagle descending, and Prometheus, steadfast, waiting. The time of the Titans was long gone. The time of the gods was beginning to show cracks, and in the midst of this, heroes were born. They were not gods, nor ordinary men. They were children of both worlds. They grew with strength, courage, and a restlessness that the gods did not know how to control. Heroes hunted monsters, sailed unknown seas, faced labyrinths, and among them, one name stood out, Hercules, son of Zeus, and immortal, strong like no one else, stubborn like few others. Hercules was not just about muscles. He also thirsted for justice. He did not like blind orders, nor seeing suffering without reason, and that was how, one day, he heard the story of Prometheus. Maybe he heard it from an old man in a tavern. Maybe he dreamed it. No one knows for sure, but something about it touched him. A titan, imprisoned on top of a mountain, being tortured every day because of an act of kindness. That made no sense, not even for a hero accustomed to absurdities. Hercules decided he was going to do something. It was his 11th task. He had already faced monsters, cleaned filthy stables, picked magic apples, but nothing prepared him for this. It wasn't just a mission. It was a gesture, a choice, and he went. He climbed the mountain alone. No god tried to stop him. Maybe because they were too busy, maybe because they knew they couldn't hold back a hero when he had already made up his mind. The climb was difficult. The rocks cut his feet. The air grew thin, but he didn't stop. When he reached the top, he saw Prometheus, thin, tied up, but still with his eyes steady. The eagle was coming through the sky, as always, but this time it met resistance. Hercules drew his bow, aimed, shot. The arrow streaked through the air like lightning. It hit the bird in the chest. The eagle fell. Silence, for the first time in centuries. Silence. Prometheus looked at the hero. He said nothing. He just breathed. For the first time, his breath was whole. Hercules approached. He broke the chains with his hands. The shackles snapped like dry twigs. Prometheus fell to his knees. He was free. Zeus saw it all. From up high. He could have stopped it, but he didn't. Maybe he understood that it was time, or maybe he gave in just for the sake of Hercules, his son. But what matters is that Prometheus was not chained again. His punishment ended there. There was no celebration. There was no exaggerated thanks. Just one man helping another, and a new silence on the top of the mountain. Prometheus walked down the mountain slowly. There was no rush. Each step was strange, as if he had to learn how to walk again. The wind was still cold, the rocks still cut, but something had changed. For the first time in centuries, he felt no pain. He felt tired, yes, but it was a calm tiredness, a tiredness that comes after something worthwhile. Hercules didn't say much. He just walked beside him, as if he knew that some things don't need to be said. The hero had accomplished his mission, but he had also touched on something deeper, the notion that true courage doesn't always come from strength, but from the right gesture at the right time. And Prometheus, deep down, was at peace, not with Zeus, not with the gods, but with himself, because now he knew that fire was no longer just a spark, it was a seed. With every city that was born, with every bonfire that was lit, his gesture spread. He had changed the destiny of humanity, and no matter how much it had cost him, he would do it all over again. Down below, in the world of men, no one knew that Prometheus was free, but they felt it. Something in the air was changing. The wind was blowing differently. The stories around the fire took on a new tone, a tone of resistance, of memory, and little by little, Prometheus's name stopped being just a legend. It became a symbol. In some villages, people drew his image on clay walls. In others, they sang songs that spoke of a chained man who brought light. They weren't hymns. They were whispers, but they were enough, because memory, when it's true, doesn't need statues. It lives in small gestures, in small embers, and Prometheus, now free, began to wander in silence. He didn't seek applause, nor did he want revenge. He walked along the edges of the world, observing what had become possible. The houses with chimneys, the kitchens with clay pots, the tools forged in fire, the eyes of children shining around the first stories. He knew he wouldn't see the whole future, that he would not live forever, but he knew that something of him would remain, maybe in the form of heat, maybe in the form of ideas, maybe in the form of calm disobedience, the kind of disobedience that does not scream, but ignites. the kind that does not destroy, but transforms. And so, with calm steps, Prometheus disappeared among the hills and forests, like an ember carried by the wind, without a grand ending, without applause, but with something much rarer, the calm certainty that it was worth it. You may not realize it, but you carry Prometheus in every part of your day. Not literally, of course, but in everything that involves choice, creation, risk. The fire he brought stopped being just heat. It became everything that moves the world forward. And the curious thing is that Zeus knew this. After Prometheus was freed, he didn't try to put out the fire again. He didn't order the darkness back. He didn't send another eagle. He just let it happen. Maybe he understood that some defeats can't be undone. Maybe he accepted that absolute control is a beautiful but tiring illusion. Or maybe, deep down, he also felt a kind of relief, because ruling a world where everything obeys you can be comfortable, but ruling a world where people think for themselves, even if they defy the rules, can be much more interesting. And so, humans continued, first with small things: axes, pots, oil lamps, then with bolder things: boats, bridges, rituals, writing. Every time a new idea emerged, it was as if a spark of Prometheus had been rekindled, and over time, the flame spread through tribes, kingdoms, empires. Wherever there was courage to create, there was a part of the Titan, but there was also risk, because with fire came choice, and with choice came mistakes. Fire also burned. It also destroyed. It also hurt. Wars used fire. Anger fed it. Ambition sometimes turned it into a weapon, but still, it remained fire. A power that is neither good nor bad, that only reveals what is inside the one who uses it. And perhaps that is the deepest part of the story. Prometheus did not bring salvation. He brought responsibility. He did not give you a miracle. He gave you a decision. You light the fire. You choose what to do with it. And that is why it is eternal. Because as long as there is someone capable of deciding, of learning, of changing, there will be a flame burning. There is something curious about the silence after pain. It is not empty. It carries an echo, and Prometheus, as he walked free, heard this echo in every corner where humanity grew. It was not a loud sound. It was almost a sigh, a kind of gratitude that is not said out loud, but is shown in actions. In tending a fire, in sharing a hot meal, in the sparkle, in the eyes of someone telling a story. These small gestures, scattered like ashes in the wind, formed the true tribute. And yet, many did not know who he was. They did not know his name. They only felt the result of what he did, and that is okay. Prometheus never wanted fame. What he wanted was justice. He was warmth where there was cold, light where there was fear, decision where there was blind obedience, and above all, time. Time for humans to discover, little by little, who they were. Because even after the fire, there were still doubts. There were still dangers. There were still angry gods. Pandora, with her box already open, had spread chaos, but deep down inside her, as you remember, there was something forgotten, hope, and hope was not born of the gods. It did not come as a prize. It remained deep down, almost forgotten, like someone waiting for the right moment to appear. Maybe because she knew that without fire, she would not resist. But now, with the flame lit, she could come out, grow, breathe. And that was what Prometheus saw around her. Hope, timid but present, in every candle lit in the darkness, in every tired face that still decides to continue, in every child who learns something new, and, without knowing it, lights another spark. Zeus watched all of this from afar. He no longer interfered as much, maybe out of pride, maybe out of exhaustion, maybe because, even in his arrogance, he was also learning, because even the gods when faced with true resistance, change, even if slowly, even if without admitting it. And so, the world went on, with failures, with falls, with mistakes, but also with courage, with warmth, with sparks hidden in every heart that decides not to accept the darkness. The fire no longer belonged to the gods. It was yours. You may not be tied to a rock. You may not see eagles descending from the sky, but there are days when it feels similar. When the world weighs on you, when everything seems distant, cold, meaningless. And that's when Prometheus returns. Not as a distant figure, but as a reflection, because his story, deep down, is about enduring, about continuing even when everything tells you to stop, about enduring the absurd with stubborn calm. Prometheus didn't defeat Zeus with force. He didn't shout. He didn't make speeches. He just endured. And that was enough. That became a symbol. And maybe you need that now, not miracles, but patience, to know that pain has an end, that punishment passes, that even the strongest of kings eventually tire, and that, in the end, what's left is the flame you decided to keep burning, because that's what it's all about, continuing to burn, even when the wind blows, even when it seems useless, even when no one thanks you. You burn because that's what makes you human, and that's what Prometheus saw in you. Not force, not perfection, but persistence. That beautiful stubbornness of someone who stumbles 1,000 times and still tries again. You don't need to defy gods, but you can, every day, defy the darkness, and that's enough. It's already heroic, and maybe, just maybe, that's why Prometheus still walks around. Invisible, yes, forgotten, sometimes, but present in every gesture of silent courage, in every difficult decision made with a heavy heart, in every hand that holds a candle, even though it trembles. The myth is not in the past, it's in you. Many myths end in glory, with crowns, thrones, temples. Not Prometheus. He wasn't crowned. There was no party. He didn't become a god. And, to be honest, he never wanted any of that. Prometheus didn't want to be worshipped. He wanted no one else to have to go through what he went through, not to be remembered, but so that no one else would be forgotten. He knew that worship comes and goes, a statue today, oblivion tomorrow. But the gesture remains. And his gesture was simple, to give what was denied, to pass on what could free him, even knowing that it could destroy everything for him. And it did, but even so, he gave. And that's rare. That's almost incomprehensible, because most people expect something in return. A thank you, a reward, a place of honor, but not Prometheus. He gave, and then disappeared. He walked through empty fields. He crossed forests without leaving a trace. And wherever he went, he left traces that no one saw, ideas. Small ideas, like seeds. And that, in the end, was the most powerful thing. Because what is born from the right idea never dies. It never becomes a seed again. It never accepts being erased. And so, even if you have never heard the whole story, something of it is already in you, maybe at that moment, when you decided not to remain silent, or when you helped someone without anyone seeing, or when you chose the hardest path just because you knew it was the right one. In those moments, without knowing it, you lit a part of the flame, and maybe, far away, Prometheus felt it. Maybe he stopped for a moment, looked up at the sky, and smiled. You walk down any street. It could be your city. It could be a dream. It doesn't matter. Everything around you seems ordinary. Streetlights, concrete, background noise. But deep inside, in what you can't see, there's something burning. Something that started a long, long time ago, and that hasn't gone out. It's inside you, even if you haven't noticed, because Prometheus's fire wasn't trapped in bonfires. It walked. It entered your words, your eyes, your desires. And when you decide to change something, even if it's small, it appears subtle, but present. Think about the times you did something difficult, even though you were afraid. That conversation you avoided for weeks, the decision that kept you awake at night, the moment you said no when everything was pushing you to say yes. These moments are small flames. They don't make noise. They don't get applause, but they burn. They burn from within, just like Prometheus's certainty that he had to act burned, that even when he was trapped, even when he was alone, he could still serve something greater. And that, deep down, is what drives the story. Not the physical fire, but the other, the invisible fire, the will to change things, the refusal to accept the world as it is, simply because it's always been that way. Prometheus was a titan, yes, but his greatness didn't come from size. It came from choice. And that choice now is yours. Because every day, you will come across situations in which you can keep quiet or light up. You can go with the flow or break the pattern. You can act like everyone else or like no one else. And believe me, that's no small thing. It's not a detail. That's where it all starts. That's where you become part of the same story, because Prometheus didn't want to create followers. He wanted to create successors, people capable of continuing his work without waiting for permission, people who don't need lightning in their hands, but courage in their hearts, people who choose the difficult, the strange, the slow, because they know that the easy, oftentimes, is just the quickest way to get lost. The flame he brought is not about power, it's about awareness, and awareness hurts. It's tiring. It puts you face to face with truths you'd rather ignore, but it also frees you, because with it, you stop living in the dark. And even if the world is still full of shadows, at least you know where you're stepping. At least you feel the heat. Prometheus knew he was going to suffer. He knew Zeus wouldn't let it go, but it happened anyway, because some choices don't guarantee a happy ending. They only make sense, and sometimes sense is enough. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to keep going. Light up. Choose. Every day, even when you're tired, even when you're alone. Because every time you do that, you confirm something Prometheus already knew, that it's worth it. That the price, no matter how high, doesn't outweigh the freedom to think for yourself. And maybe, just maybe, Zeus himself learned this, even if he never admitted it, because even the greatest of gods understands, at some point, that you can't extinguish what has already become part of the world. And the fire has become. It's here, in your room now, on the screen, in your mind, in the way you breathe, think, decide. It doesn't burn your skin, but it warms what you carry inside. And tomorrow, when you wake up, it will still be there, silent, waiting. Have you ever noticed how the biggest changes almost never start with shouts? Sometimes, everything starts with a small gesture, a refusal, a detour, a quiet choice made at the right moment. That's how it was with Prometheus. He didn't climb to Olympus shouting. He didn't knock on the gates demanding justice. He snuck in, he stole a flame, and he left. A silent act, but full of intention. And this kind of rebellion is what changes the world. Not the kind that wants to destroy everything, but the kind that decides to light something new. And maybe you're there, wondering, but I'm not a titan. I have no power. I can't change big things. But the truth is that no one starts big. Not even Prometheus. He started by observing, feeling, seeing humans with empathy when all the other gods ignored them. That's where the change was born. In his gaze. And then, in his gesture. And you have that gaze too. At some point, have you had the feeling that something wasn't right? Have you felt the urge to act even though you knew it would bring problems? That's the beginning. This is the fire. The world tries to put out this flame. with routine, fear, discouragement, but it is there. And sometimes, all it needs is space, a small gap in your day, a moment of silence, a moment when you really listen to yourself. Fire needs air to burn, and you need time to remember why it started, because it is easy to forget. It is easy to get lost. And that is why stories like Prometheus exist, to remind us that value lies in the gesture, not in the applause. Prometheus did not wait for approval. He did not make risk calculations. He simply did what was right, even if it was wrong for others. And even after centuries of pain, he did not regret it. He did not apologize, because he knew he had done something that no one could undo. He gave humans more than warmth. He gave them the chance to choose. And choice is where it all begins. You don't have to change the whole world, just your piece of it, the way you treat someone, the moment you say no, the courage to move on even without guarantees. This is rebellion too. This is continuing what Prometheus began. Not everyone wants to see far, to truly see, because the more you see, the harder it is to pretend you didn't see. The harder it is to remain silent, the easier it is to close your eyes, follow the line, obey without thinking. Prometheus couldn't do that. He saw, and because he saw, he acted. But seeing has a price. Seeing separates you. It takes you out of your comfort zone. It forces you to bear truths that others don't want to touch. And maybe you felt this too, that feeling of realizing an injustice, a contradiction, and asking yourself, why doesn't anyone talk about this? Why does everyone act as if it were normal? And you stay there, with this discomfort in your chest, trying to decide whether to ignore it or to do something. It was at this point that Prometheus stood out. He had no doubts. He knew that seeing implied acting. He knew that by lighting that flame, he was choosing to side with the fragile, the small, the forgotten. He was, in other words, giving up the comfort that Olympus offered, because he could have stayed there, quiet, safe, alongside the gods, with banquets, laughter, and eternity. But he didn't want to. He preferred the risk. He preferred the mud of the earth to the golden coldness of the sky. And this isn't just about courage. It's about conviction, about not being able to bear to see suffering where there could be relief, cold where there could be warmth, silence where there could be history. And if you've ever felt out of place because you see too much, know this: you're not wrong. You're just awake. And being awake in this world is tiring, because you see the details, you feel the weight, you notice the repetitions, but you also see the possibilities. And that's why you insist, even when it's easier to keep quiet, even when no one seems to notice. Prometheus also walked alone. He wasn't followed by crowds. He had no disciples. He was just one, against everything, against everyone. But sometimes, all it takes is one who lights up, one who breaks the right rule, one who sees far and chooses to act anyway. And if today you feel like you're carrying a weight, that you think too much, that you notice more than you'd like, maybe that's not weakness. Maybe it's a gift, the same gift that moved Prometheus. The gift of not accepting, of not normalizing what hurts, of preferring restlessness to indifference. And this gift, although solitary, is also what connects you to an entire invisible line of people who came before. People who didn't accept, people who lit up, people who transformed a dark world into something where, at least sometimes, you can still see some light. You're not alone. You never were. You must have noticed that real changes don't happen quickly. They don't scream. They don't come like thunder. They dig. They wait. They grow slowly, like roots. And Prometheus knew this. He was in no hurry, even imprisoned, even bleeding. He waited. He waited without knowing if he would be freed, without knowing if humans would really use fire for something good. He just waited, because he knew that some things take time, a lot of time. Too much time for those who live counting the minutes, but not for those who understand that transformation requires patience. And maybe you are in a moment of waiting right now too, waiting for something to change, for something to get better, for some pain to go away. And the wait seems endless. It seems like punishment. But not all waiting is a waste of time. Sometimes it is preparation. It is ground being made inside. It is something adjusting in silence, out of sight. Prometheus didn't know what would come next. He only knew what needed to be done, and he did it. Then he waited, and in that waiting, he became something bigger. Not because he wanted to, but because he didn't give up, because he held on, because he took a deep breath, because he endured the absurd with determination. And that, in the end, made him eternal. Not because of his powers, but because of his constancy, because of his repeated decision not to back down. And you have that too. Even if you think you don't, even if you're tired, even if you're in doubt, you keep going. And that's already a lot, much more than it seems, because in a time when everything wants you to hurry, to react, to urge on, deciding to stop, to wait, to breathe, is an act of strength. It's pure resistance. And this calmness, the calmness of those who know how to wait, is something rare. It's something strong. It's not passivity, it's patience. It's that pause that doesn't run away, but observes. That doesn't give up, but prepares. And Prometheus, even tied up, was like that, silent, attentive, waiting for the right moment. And he came. He came with Hercules. He came with an arrow. He came with the breaking of the chains. But only because before that, there was a time of waiting, a time full of pain, yes, but also full of meaning. And maybe what you are living now is that, a time in between, a time of silence before the change. Don't rush. Don't cover yourself up. Just keep the flame going. Prometheus didn't write books. He didn't sculpt temples. He didn't leave a statue with his face. He left fire. Something simple, warm, alive, but also dangerous, fragile, easy to lose control of, easy to extinguish. It's like that with almost everything worthwhile. It seems simple, but it carries depths. Fire was the first human tool with a soul. It warmed, protected, destroyed, cooked, frightened. A single element, 1,000 functions. And the greatness of Prometheus lies precisely in this. He didn't offer something spectacular. He didn't promise glory nor immortality. He offered something simple, but essential. Something that transforms everything around it. That gives possibility. That allows creation. And that's more than magic. It's freedom. Because with fire, humans started to make choices. They stopped just reacting. They started to act. They started to decide. That's the language of fire. Action. Decision. Transformation. And maybe you need that right now. Not something spectacular, but something simple that makes sense. A gesture, a pause, a small beginning, something of your own, because the world today screams for great things. It wants everything yesterday. But almost always, what really changes is the simple. It's the gesture that no one sees. The care of those who listen, the kindness of those who wait, the courage of those who say, I don't know, but continue anyway. Prometheus was not a hero like Hercules. He didn't have the charm of Apollo, nor the tricks of Hermes. He was constant, firm, and his greatness lies precisely in the fact that he didn't want to stand out. He wanted to help, and that, in the end, is what is most lacking. People who help without expecting anything. People who see a need and simply act. No selfies, no stage, just presence, just warmth, like fire. And maybe today, all you need is this, to feel that you can start over. that you can light something even if it's small, that you still have a choice. And you do. You always have, even when it seems like you don't, because that spark still lives inside you, that old piece of history, that echo of the Titan who chose you, and chose with conviction, not because you were strong, but because you were capable, able to feel, to learn, to make mistakes and move on. And that's enough. Not all teachings come in the form of speech. Some come in silence, in the way someone observes, in the way someone remains, even when everything seems to be falling apart. Prometheus was such a teacher. He did not give speeches. He did not defend himself. When he was tied up, he remained silent. When the eagle came, he did not scream. When time passed, he did not beg. He just breathed. He watched. He endured. And this, over time, became a lesson, because sometimes what teaches the most is not what is said, but what is endured. The posture of someone who does not give in. The presence of someone who remains, even without having anything. Prometheus did not teach humans how to think, but he showed them that they could. He did not hand over a manual, but he ignited the possibility. And this is a way of teaching that does not impose, that offers, that invites. You must have learned something like this before. A person who did not give you answers, but showed you paths, who did not solve your problems, but stayed by your side while you figured out what to do. This kind of presence is rare, and this is what Prometheus represents. He didn't save humans, he just believed in them. And sometimes, that's what changes a life the most. Someone believing in you without demanding perfection. Someone who sees your flaws, limitations, failures, and still stays there. Present, firm, like a fire that never goes out. You can be that too. For yourself, for someone around you. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to be there. You just need to decide to keep going, even when everything seems meaningless, even when the world demands haste, performance, brilliance. Being silent is also an act. It's also a choice, a way of resisting the noise, of listening to what's inside. And sometimes it's in the silence that you find yourself, that you remember, that you understand. And perhaps that's Prometheus's greatest legacy, not the fire itself, but the silence between one flame and another, the space where something begins to grow, the calm that precedes creation. You can light 1,000 fires, but you can also sit next to just one and stay there, breathe, wait, understand. And that's already a lot. There are truths that don't come like thunder. They come slowly, like embers. First, they heat your skin. Then, they penetrate deep. And when you realize it, you can no longer pretend you didn't feel it. The story of Prometheus is one of those truths. It doesn't shout. It doesn't impose. But it stays there, burning. And little by little, it burns away old certainties. The first thing it burns is the idea that obeying is always the right thing to do. Prometheus disobeyed. He knew the rules. He knew the punishment. But even so, he chose to act. And this becomes an uncomfortable question. When does obedience become cowardice? When does following orders distance you from who you are? And more, who profits from your silence? Zeus wanted order. He wanted control. He wanted humans to stay in the dark. And for a long time, that worked until one stood up, just one, and broke everything, not with force, but with fire. Because fire, even small, changes everything. It doesn't have to be big, it just has to be there. And that goes for you too. You don't have to be a hero or a titan. You just have to remember that you have a choice, and that every time you choose courageously, you light something up. You don't have to change the world, but you can change the room you're in. You can heat up a conversation. You can light up a silence. You can break an invisible chain with a simple decision. Don't repeat yourself. Don't accept. Don't pretend you didn't see it. It's simple, but it's not easy, because doing this is expensive. It can isolate you. It can tire you out. It can make you seem strange, out of place, but it also gives you something that can't be bought: meaning, clarity, freedom. Prometheus paid a high price, but he never regretted it, because even when he was bleeding, he knew he did what was right. And this conviction, this inner knowledge that no one can take away, is what sustains him. You can find it too, in your own way, in your own time, with your words, with your gestures. Maybe no one will see it, maybe no one will understand, but you will know, you will feel it inside, and that's enough. The truth, when it's yours, doesn't need an audience. It just needs courage. Thinking differently always costs something. It's not just about having a new idea, it's about having the courage to stick to it when everyone around you says otherwise. It's about holding on to that idea firmly, even when it becomes a burden. Prometheus knew this. He wasn't punished for stealing fire. He was punished for daring to think that humans deserved more. That, for Zeus, was unforgivable, because thinking differently threatens what is established. It asks dangerous questions. What if the world could be different? What if this rule isn't fair? What if I don't accept it? These questions, in themselves, are enough to light fires. And Prometheus lit them all. He didn't just bring warmth to our hands, he brought restlessness to our minds. And that's what makes his story so relevant today, because even today, those who think outside the box are viewed with suspicion. Those who question the norm are called rebellious, exaggerated, inconvenient. But these are the people who move the world, not with shouts, but with silent actions, with ideas that go against the tide, with gestures that seem small, but carry worlds. Maybe you were once that person. Maybe you chose a more difficult path, or said something that no one wanted to hear. Maybe you kept quiet when everyone else was shouting, or spoke when everyone else was silent. That is also fire. A fire that burns inside, that sometimes distances you from others, but that also brings you closer to yourself. Because there is a strange peace in being true to what you believe, even if it hurts, even if it costs. Prometheus didn't try to convince anyone. He didn't make a speech, he just did it, and that was enough to change everything. His simple and dangerous action became a symbol, and you carry that symbol when you choose to be yourself in a world that pressures you to be something else. That is not pride. It is awareness. It is knowing that living without thinking, without choosing, is surviving halfway, and you deserve more than that. The fire that Prometheus stole was not just a physical flame, it was an idea. And ideas, when well cared for, grow, slowly, like seeds, at first silently, invisible even, but then they take hold, they take root, they begin to spread, and the most curious thing, no one can predict how far they will go. Prometheus may not have known how long his gesture would last. Maybe he thought that, with luck, a village would survive the cold. Maybe he thought that some humans would learn to cook, to shape iron, to build. But he never imagined that, centuries later, there would still be someone telling his story. And not because he wanted to be remembered, but because the idea went too far to be erased. Because once you learn that you can choose, no one can force you to accept it. And that is dangerous. For kings, for gods, for anyone who depends on blind obedience. Fire, like a seed, does not grow the same everywhere. In some, it becomes invention. In others, it becomes resistance. In some, it becomes art. In others, it turns into revolt. But in everyone, it changes the ground. Nothing goes back to the way it was once the fire arrives. Not the world. Not you. And maybe that's why so many people try to put out the embers of others. Because when someone lights something up, even if silently, they end up illuminating what others would rather keep hidden, and then no one can pretend they didn't see it. You must have felt it before. When someone acts courageously, even if you don't say anything, something inside you moves, as if a forgotten part awakens, as if the seed, which was there all along, begins to germinate. And then everything changes, not from the outside, but from the inside. You begin to realize what you tolerate, what you hide, what you accept out of fear. And this awareness burns because it demands change. And change is tiring. It demands effort, but it also liberates. Because in the end, freedom doesn't come from what they let you do. It comes from what you decide to no longer accept. And Prometheus knew this. That's why he chose to carry the weight of having seen further, of having felt it before, of having refused to pretend that everything was okay. He knew it was isolating, but he also knew that one day someone would understand, that the seed would grow in other hands, in other eyes, on other nights, like now. Over time, even the oldest pains become memory, and memories, when not denied, become direction. Prometheus knew this. He didn't want the world to remember his pain, to feel sorry for him. He wanted them to remember the reason for it, because the reason is what sustains. It's what keeps the story alive. And you carry memories like that too. Things that hurt, but taught you. Situations that you endured, even without knowing how. Moments when the world seemed too tight, but you kept going. And today, even if there are still doubts, you keep going. And that, in itself, is strength. The memory of Prometheus is not about suffering. It is about decision, about someone who saw what no one wanted to see and did what no one had the courage to do. And this memory, this kind of memory, becomes direction. It becomes criteria. It helps you know when something is not right, when silence weighs too much, when an apology is just a disguise for control. And in those moments, even without realizing it, you are guided by this ancient fire. Prometheus' courage is not only in the theft, it is in what came after, in the silence during the torture, in the calm as time passed, in the dignity of someone who did not become a martyr, but became a root. And you, when you choose to act even when afraid, follow the same line. You may not climb mountains or face gods, but you face yourself. You face the voices that say, it's no use, and still, you insist, and that is rare, and that is beautiful, because living truthfully is hard work. It makes you want to pretend, to give in, to let it go, but you are here, listening to this story, feeling something that burns deep down, and that already shows that the flame still lives, that the memory has become something more. It has become direction, and maybe when the day dawns, you will take this direction with you, even without knowing, even without telling anyone. Just keep going. Fire doesn't ask permission to burn, it just happens. It appears in a flash, grows in a puff, spreads when no one is looking, and Prometheus knew this. That's why he stole a spark, because one was enough, just one, to change everything, to break the order, to transform silence into voice, shadow into choice. And it's the same with ideas. They don't come with an invitation. They come with a scare, in a doubt, in pain, in an uncomfortable question. What if I don't accept anymore? What if I do something different? What if I'm not what they expect? These questions are fire. And you, at some point, have asked one of them. Maybe when you decided to walk away from something toxic. Maybe when you said no to an unfair rule. Maybe when you chose to remain silent where everyone was talking, or to speak where everyone was silent. In those moments, you lit something. even without knowing, even when you were afraid, and you don't need anyone to approve or for anyone to understand, because true light doesn't ask permission, it just appears. And those who are prepared see it, those who aren't look away, but it's still there, firm, like Prometheus. He didn't try to convince Zeus. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't organize a plan with allies. He just went there. He got it, and he went down. Simple as that. And that's why it bothers him, because it shows that transformation sometimes is done in silence, in the dark, alone. And that's why you don't need to explain yourself so much, or justify yourself. You just need to know why you do what you do, and that, in the end, is enough. Because those who act truthfully carry their own light, and this light doesn't depend on the gaze of others. It burns inside, and it burns even when everything outside is shadow, even when the world tries to extinguish it, even when you doubt yourself, it's still there. And the more you respect it, the stronger it becomes, brighter, more alive. It doesn't need to be grand. It doesn't need to light up the whole world. It just needs to light up your steps, one at a time, one choice a day. That's fire. That's Prometheus in you. Being yourself is simple, but it's not easy, because from an early age, the world tells you how you should be, what to wear, what to feel, what to keep quiet about. It puts you in a box. It erases what doesn't fit. It rewards those who repeat themselves and punishes those who ask questions. Prometheus was one of those who asked questions, not because he was against it, but because he felt something was wrong, that humans, even fragile ones, deserved more than cold and silence. He didn't want to break everything, he just wanted to give it a chance. And for that, he became an enemy. For that, he was punished. Because when you act outside of what's expected, the system trembles, and that scares those who live by it. You may have felt this before, when you decided to tell the truth, and no one supported you. When you changed your path, and people didn't understand. When you heard, "You're not the same anymore," as if it were an insult. But what they don't know is that changing doesn't mean losing who you are. It's actually finding yourself, because sometimes you need to step away to listen to yourself. You need to break the cycle to understand what is yours and what was imposed on you. Prometheus did this. He didn't follow the other titans, nor did he bow to Zeus. He made his own path, calmly, firmly, and this required a kind of courage that cannot be learned in a book. The courage to be misunderstood, to be left aside, to be called a fool, a traitor, naive, and still continue, still say, "I still believe." You, in your own way, have done this too. When you chose the most difficult thing, when you stood up even though you were trembling, when you held back your own pain so as not to hurt others, this is also courage. This is also Prometheus. Not the grandiose figure, but the simple idea of someone who acts out of conviction, not for applause. And maybe you've never thought of it that way. Maybe you think you're just going through life, but you're not. You're resisting. You're asserting yourself. You're lighting your own flame every day. Prometheus's world was not calm. It was a stage for forces greater than anyone could control. Gods fighting for power, titans being forgotten, humans struggling to survive among rocks and shadows. And yet, in the midst of this chaos, he was silent, a silence full of determination. Because not all silence is fear. Sometimes it is strength. It is resistance. It is choice. And today, even in a world full of noise, there are still silences like this. People who don't shout, but live firmly, who don't show themselves, but make a difference, who walk around with a fire burning inside their chest, even if no one notices. And maybe you are one of these people. Someone who has seen too much, who feels the world slowly burning, who realizes when something is not right, even when everyone pretends it is. This kind of sensitivity may seem like a burden, but it is a gift. It is a way of seeing what others don't see, of hearing what others ignore. And yes, it is tiring, because feeling more is living deeper, but it is also living more truthfully. And Prometheus lived like this. He didn't hide on Olympus. He walked among humans. He observed. He listened. He suffered together. And that's why he decided to act. Not because he expected gratitude, but because he couldn't help but act. It was either that or betray himself. And you may have already experienced something similar. A situation where keeping quiet seemed safer, but something inside you wouldn't allow it. When going with the flow was the easiest thing to do, but you knew you wouldn't be able to sleep peacefully. These are the little bonfires of life, the moments when your soul decides for you. And after that, there's no going back. You can no longer pretend you didn't see it or that you didn't feel it. And that's when the transformation begins. At the exact point where you understand that even alone, you need to keep going, that your fire, no matter how small it may seem, still serves to illuminate someone. Sometimes yourself, sometimes someone who is nearby, in the dark, in silence, also waiting for a spark. Prometheus was chained with iron on a cold mountain, full view of everyone. But there are chains worse than these, the ones that no one sees, the ones that you yourself carry silently on your shoulders or in your mind, chains that have no sound but are heavy, that don't shine but hurt, and the cruelest, chains that many consider normal, accepting what hurts because it's always been that way, pretending not to feel it because it's strong, living tired because everyone else does, smiling even when everything inside you just wants to breathe. These are the chains of now, and there is no visible mountain where they hold you. It's in your daily life. It's in the demands that you repeat to yourself. It's in the comparisons that never stop. And in this scenario, the fire of Prometheus is still necessary because it doesn't free you with magic, but it lights your vision. It shows you what's wrong. It exposes what was accepted out of habit, not by choice. When you start to see the chain doesn't break all at once, it starts to weaken. Have you taken this step? Have you ever had that moment when you realized that something was holding you back and said, enough? It could have been a job, a relationship, an idea. It could have been a thought that you repeated every day without questioning it. And there, in the middle of it all, you decided to turn on your own light, not out of revenge, but out of necessity. Because sometimes what saves you is not a hero coming from far away. It's you, exhausted, finally listening to yourself. And that's when Prometheus comes back, not as an ancient myth, but as a reminder that you can, that you're not crazy for feeling what you feel, that it's fair to want more, not more things, but more meaning, more clarity, more space to be who you are without having to hide. And yes, this will bother you. It will scare you, because those who break free from the chains always seem like a threat to those who are still trapped. But someone has to start. Someone has to show that there is another way, and that someone can be you. Freedom is beautiful in theory. Everyone says they want it, but in practice, it's scary, because being free means not being able to blame anyone. It means looking at your own choices. It means walking without a path, sometimes without a map. And Prometheus knew this. He gave fire, yes, but along with it, he gave a burden, responsibility, because now humans could decide, and that changes everything. Before, if something went wrong, they could blame the gods. They could say it was fate. Now no. Now there was choice. Now there was guilt. There was risk. And this divided the world. Some used fire to build, others to destroy. And Prometheus saw all this, not with regret, but with awareness. He knew that there was no power without consequences. He knew that giving freedom was opening doors to the best and the worst, and even so, he thought it was worth it, because controlling everything can prevent tragedies, but it also prevents miracles. And maybe you understand this. Maybe you've already felt the weight of choosing, of giving up the easy path, of refusing a security that came at too high a cost. Because living freely also means accepting your fall. It means taking responsibility for your mistakes. It means getting up after a fall without blaming the whole world. But above all, it means living truthfully, with meaning, with your own ground. You may be in a moment like that when you need to make a decision, when no one else can choose for you, and that is scary, but it also frees you, because when you accept this risk, you start living with presence. Every gesture has weight, every step has intention, and even on bad days, you feel like you're on your own path, not on someone else's path, not on the path imposed on you, but on your own. And that, as difficult as it may seem, is where true peace lies. The peace that does not depend on external silence, but on internal coherence. And that is what Prometheus taught, without words, that the risk of being free is worth more than the security of living imprisoned. Not every flame is visible, not every presence makes a noise, and some of the brightest lights are precisely those that remain when everything around them goes dark. Prometheus knew this. He knew that even if he was forgotten, even if his name went out, the flame would continue, because he didn't create something to last in monuments. He created something to last in life, in everyday life, in small gestures, in the way he looks. And today, even though many people don't know his entire story, they feel what he did. When you light a candle on a difficult day, he's there. When you warm your hands on a hot mug on a cold day, he's there. When you tell a story around the fire with loved ones, he's there. Because he was the one who made all of this possible. And it's not about being remembered, it's about having left something that continues, even without his presence. That's the true legacy. It's not in the name, it's in the change. It's in what was born later. And you, even without realizing it, do this too. In every action that improves the space around you, every time you choose to care, even when you're tired, every honest conversation that helps someone see themselves better, you also leave a fire wherever you go. You won't always see the result, you won't always be thanked, but something will change. It will continue. It will spread, just like the flame that Prometheus lit. And maybe that's the greatest meaning of living, leaving a light that continues, even after you're gone. A calm, a strength, a path. And when you live like this, with intention, with truth, with courage, the world will never go back to being dark. The hardest part is not doing the right thing when everyone is watching. It's doing it when no one is, when there's no prize, when there are no witnesses, when no one will know. And that's what Prometheus did. He didn't steal fire to show off. He didn't call the other gods to challenge Zeus in public. He did it all in the dark, alone, in silence, because it wasn't about being seen. It was about doing what needed to be done. And that's one of the most beautiful and hardest parts of the story, because it's easy to act when there's recognition. But true character appears in the invisible, in private, in the intimate. And you've experienced this too. There have been times when no one would know if you acted differently, when you could have overlooked it, pretended, avoided it, but you chose to keep the truth, even if it left you silent, even if it didn't bring applause. This kind of choice is rare, because it doesn't reward you on the outside, but on the inside, you sleep more peacefully, you walk more lightly, and even if no one else understands, you know, you did what you had to do. Prometheus didn't wait for a sign or support. He felt the discomfort, he felt the urgency, and he acted, not to change the whole world, but to light a spark. And that's what you do when you choose consciously. Every time you care, even when you're tired, every time you tell the truth, even when you're afraid, every time you respect, even when you could ignore it, you light something. It may seem like little, but it's these little lights that hold the world together. They're the ones that form the invisible fabric of dignity, of trust, of hope, and that's what remains. Even when everything changes, even when time erases names and dates, the right gesture continues to shine, silent, firm, alive. There comes a time when there is no need to explain anymore. There is no need to convince anymore, because what has been done speaks for itself. And Prometheus reached that point. He did not argue with Zeus. He did not complain. He did not try to justify himself. He just kept going. Trapped? Yes. But calm, because sometimes silence is the strongest response. It is the sign that you have already said everything you needed to say with your actions. And if you have ever been through this, you know how it is. When you make a difficult decision and the world tries to bend you, question you, push you back to where you were comfortable, but you do not respond, you just stay, because you know the value of what you did. And that is not arrogance, it is firmness, it is maturity. Prometheus was not proud, but he also did not regret it. He knew that his gesture would not be understood by everyone, that the punishment would come, that the price would be high. But still, he would not back down. And it is at this point that courage becomes wisdom, because in the beginning, you fight. You want to prove, explain, defend. But after a while, you realize that you don't need it anymore. Life itself shows it. History itself confirms it. The fire he lit was still alive. It grew, it spread, it warmed. That's what mattered. Not the punishment, not the recognition, but the effect, what remained, what changed. And you, with your silent decision, with your coherence even on difficult nights, are also leaving something. Something that perhaps no one says out loud, but that can be felt. That remains in the air, in the environment, in the way others start to behave around you. Because those who live truthfully change the space. They illuminate without wanting to. They teach without pointing. And that is what Prometheus did until the end. Even in chains, he was a master, not with words, but with presence. There is no flame that lasts forever. Every light burns with a limited time. Every bonfire, no matter how hot, one day turns to ash, and Prometheus knew this. The fire he gave to humans was not eternal by nature. It was eternal by choice, by renewal, by the passing of hands. He taught humans to keep the flame alive, but also to accept when it went out. Because even fire teaches us how to lose. It teaches us that we cannot control everything, that no matter how careful we are, no matter how much wood we gather, the hour of darkness comes. And this is not failure. It is a cycle. It is rhythm. It is nature. You have already experienced this, a moment when everything seemed right, and suddenly something goes out. A relationship, a plan, a piece of you, and the temptation is to run, to despair, to try to rekindle what no longer has heat. But fire also speaks, and sometimes what it says is, let it go out. Light something else. Prometheus didn't just teach us how to light. He taught us to trust, to observe, to understand when to insist and when to accept. Because fire is wise. It dances. It retreats. It responds to the environment. And so do you. You feel when something is no longer useful, when the heat has turned to dead embers. But even so, it insists. Because it is afraid of the night, afraid of the void. But Prometheus knew that all darkness also prepares the next fire, that no flame is born from nothing, that it needs darkness, silence, cold. And so, he waited. He trusted. And so can you. You can accept loss, not as an end, but as space, as fertile ground, as a pause before the next light, because you have not lost the ability to light. You just need another time, another focus, another gesture. Fire lives in you, and it knows when it is time to burn and when it is time to rest. At first glance, fire seems to be still, a flame in the same place, flickering at the same rhythm, but in reality, it moves, it spreads, it goes from one corner to another, it passes from hand to hand, it grows, recedes, changes. Fire is not just presence, it is movement, and that is what Prometheus provoked, a movement that has never stopped, because once you learn to light, you also learn to move on, to leave the place where it hurt, to look for a space where you can breathe better, and fire helps with that. It lights up the ground. It shows you what is ahead. It warms your tired body in the middle of the road, and maybe you are now in one of those moments of transition between an old place and another that you have not yet reached, between who you were and who you are still becoming. And that confuses, it scares you, but fire, even small, helps. It reminds you of what matters, of what cannot be left behind, of the values that you learned the hard way, of the truths that only came when everything went dark. And just like Prometheus, you also learn to carry this light, not as a weapon, but as a guide, not to prove anything to anyone, but so as not to lose yourself, because the longest path is always the one that leads back inside, to your essence, to your calm. And no matter how much the world screams for haste, the light of the fire is slow. It walks at the rhythm of breathing, at the pace of care, in the patience of someone who knows that, to be true, it has to be whole. Prometheus gave you fire, but it was you who decided to use it. And now it is yours, not to shine all the time, but to be with you, in the dark, in the silence, in the next step. After everything Prometheus went through, the punishment, the loneliness, the repeated pain, he found something no one expected: peace. It wasn't a peace that came from outside. It wasn't a forgiveness from Zeus, nor a celebration from the gods. It was a peace that came from within, silent, deep, the peace of someone who knows they did the right thing, even with everything against them, even paying a high price, even without applause. And this peace is rare, because most people spend their lives trying to please, trying to fit in, trying to avoid conflict. But Prometheus did the opposite. He chose conflict, not because he liked to fight, but because he couldn't bear to see his mistake and keep quiet. And this loyalty to himself is what gave him the calm that Zeus never had, because power doesn't bring peace, control, status, adoration. None of these guarantee serenity, but living coherently does. And you felt this too, in those moments when you made a difficult choice, but knew deep down that it was the right one, when you said something that needed to be said, even though you were shaking, when he stood firm, even in doubt. Peace came later, discreetly, without an audience, but it came and it stayed, because real peace is like that. It doesn't depend on circumstances. It depends on truth, on alignment, on knowing that you are living with integrity. And that's what Prometheus carried to the end. Even without freedom, even in chains, he was whole, and you can be too. Even if the world around you is confused, even if there is still pain, peace does not come from the absence of problems. It comes from the presence of meaning, and meaning is built with gestures, with choices, with inner fire. Every story needs an end, that's what they say. But some stories don't end. They just change shape. They spread. They reinvent themselves. And that's what happened to Prometheus. After Hercules broke his chains, he didn't become king. He didn't return to Olympus. He didn't seek revenge. He simply moved on, silently, observing, walking among humans, sometimes as a myth, sometimes as a memory, sometimes as nothing, just a presence. He knew that his role was not to dominate, it was to ignite. And when the flame catches, it no longer needs the lighter. The ember spreads on its own. And that's why Prometheus never disappeared. He is in every form of silent resistance, in every person who chooses the right thing, even when the easy way seems more tempting. He lives on in small acts, in sincere words, in gestures that no one sees, but that make the world breathe easier, because his end was not the end. It was continuity. It was passage. It was a transition from a time when humans blindly obeyed to a time when they began to decide. And you live in that time, in a world where fire already exists. It has already been given. Now, it is up to you what to do with it. Put it out, forget it, use it to hurt, or keep it burning. Protect it, pass it on. The choice is yours, and it continues to be every day. This is Prometheus's legacy, not a one-time feat, but a constant reminder that thinking, creating, and feeling are forms of freedom, that courage is not the absence of fear, but persistence even when afraid, and that some gestures, however small they may seem, open paths that no one else can close. You are on this path, even now. The fire is with you. Have you ever noticed how, sometimes, all it takes is a spark to change the night? All it takes is a good memory, a deep breath, a calm image for the body to begin to give in. Sleep doesn't come with force. It comes like the fire of Prometheus, silently, small, but transformative. And that's how this story ends, or continues. Not with applause, not with lights, but with you now, in silence, breathing slowly, knowing that what began up there, with a titan who dared to feel, still lives within you. The fire is in your choices, in the way you treat others, in the way you treat yourself, in the calm with which you slow down, in the care with which you observe your own tiredness. And maybe you haven't noticed, but right now, you feel lighter. Your mind is less noisy, your body more relaxed. This is also the effect of the story. A well-told, well-felt story is like a bonfire in the dark. You don't need to understand everything. You just need to be close. Feel the warmth. Prometheus is at peace now, not because he won, but because he didn't give in. He didn't need to win. He just needed to stay. And that can also be your victory today. You don't need to solve everything. You don't need to change the whole world. You just need to keep your flame alive. Stay with yourself. Take care of what you feel. Respect what tires you. The world can wait. Night has already come, and sleep is almost here. Night is not the end. It is just the other side of the day. And sleep is not an absence. It is a return, a rest, a way the body found to repair itself without noise. And now, after so many words, you have arrived here, not in a hurry, but at your own pace, as it should be. The story of Prometheus does not end with a full stop. It ends, like the night ends, in silence, with what was left, with what you take with you. And what remains are not the details. It is not the name of each god, nor the order of the punishments. What remains is the feeling, the gesture, the idea, the memory that there was someone who chose to act when it was easier to retreat, who felt and did not pretend, who went all the way with what he believed, even if it cost everything. And this, now, is yours too. You do not need to keep everything. You just need to trust that the flame is with you, and that, even when you sleep, it is still there, calm, waiting for the new day. Because the fire of Prometheus does not go out with sleep. It rests with you. Breathe with yourself, and tomorrow, when the world starts again with its noises, you will have a calmer center inside you, a warm memory, a living ember. That is enough. You did what you needed to do. You got this far. And now, You can leave the rest for later. The body already understands, the eyes already feel heavy, the mind already surrenders. Let the darkness come. Let the rest come. The flame is safe. Good night.